Before I get going, can I thank Robin for her speech, Owen for your speech, my countrymen. I'm delighted to have an Englishman there, even if I'm from south of England. I apologize to you. And I was literally moved to tears at the beginning by the music which I heard. I've never had to experience what you've experienced in your life, those of you that performed for your friends at the beginning, and it was just really overwhelming. So thank you very much for that, and for all of the music that we've heard this morning and the speeches. It was beautiful. And of course, I would like to congratulate all of you on your tremendous achievements today. After so many years of hard work here in Bremen, you really have earned this day of graduation and of celebration, as have all of those family members and friends who've supported you on this long journey so far. And as you enjoy today, hopefully with a little bit of drink later, you can look forward and prepare to continue on into a world which really is full of opportunity. It's full of discoveries waiting to be made, but it is, as mentioned before, also full of unknowns and uncertainties. And it's a world which really is in desperate need of people with the gifts of wisdom and of passion, which we've seen a lot of both this morning already. Whatever path you decide to take next, may I wish you great success and much good fortune, because it's the path on which you apply your knowledge, your learning, and your passion, all of which you've acquired here, for earnest in the real world. And passion really is, for me, the key. Being given the opportunity to find one's passion is also a great luxury and an utter necessity. So many students feel the great pressure to rush from school to university and then straight into a career. And a blink of an eye later, they're at the end of their working life and are asking themselves where it all went. And our schools are too often rigid in their systems of teaching, as they understandably seek to impart skills which they believe will guarantee a job after graduation. And yet when I look around my friends, family, and colleagues, I see that those with the greatest levels of fulfillment, and yes, also success, are those who at some point in their lives were allowed the time to identify and pursue their true passions. Take me. To someone looking in on my childhood, my path seemed preordained, and to a certain degree it was. I grew up in a household with 5 grand pianos. My parents were both concert pianists. My grandmother was a cellist. Her father was an organist. Music was my first language, my first means of communication. And here I am, a conductor. So far, so good. And yet within the music industry, just as within any of your chosen subjects, there are many different roles to be filled, many different paths that can be taken. And at various stages, I ran the risk of taking the path closest to me, the path most easily accessible and comfortable, the path which would have led to a perfectly respectable life, indeed a life full of music and full of joy, but also a path which would have diverted me from locating my own true passion of conducting. My first instrument was the piano, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't feel much urge to practice in the morning. Then, aged 8, I saw a cello hiding in the corner at my grandmother's house, and I asked to learn it. I did, and I was good at it. I studied at the Royal College of Music. I earned a bachelor's and a master's degree then in Düsseldorf afterwards. I performed in many concerts as a chamber musician and a soloist, and had many successes. But again, I wasn't waking up in the morning with a burning desire to practice. I didn't live and breathe the instrument. I wasn't obsessed. And at the same time, I was becoming more aware of my surroundings, of the opportunities out there in the world, of the sheer dedication required for success in any field, let alone the desperately competitive field of music. I sensed that my talent would take me a certain distance on the cello, but not necessarily as far as I would have wished. I could see my future playing out in shades of gray rather than in splendid technicolor. It also concerned me that I felt a much stronger desire to play football with my friends than to sit practicing at my cello. Surely, if this was going to be a job for life, it should be the greatest source of energy and excitement that I had. And so my quest continued. What did I really want? What was my calling? And looking back, the road was clear from early on. When I was a child, my parents would ask me if I wanted to listen to a cassette, which probably none of you know what that is. It's like an old plastic thing with, you can ask your professors. I used to listen, to cassettes, and they say, would you like to listen to Dickens or Brothers Grimm or something to put me to sleep? But without exception, I used to ask to listen to classical music, and I used to ask to listen to symphonic music, Scheherazade by Rimsky-Korsakov, or a Beethoven symphony, or Brahms. These works were vivid for me. They were full of fantasy, and they themselves created myriad fairy-tale worlds every night. Back then, the voice of the symphony orchestra was the voice which spoke to me most compellingly. And while I was still at school, I asked to conduct the orchestra there and had my first experiences in the discipline. Then when I moved to Germany to study, I founded my own chamber orchestra with my fellow students and began conducting concerts around the region. While studying for my master's on the cello, I concurrently studied conducting in Düsseldorf, and through chance and fate entered and won a major conducting competition a few years later. From the get-go with conducting, the prospect of studying a new piece of orchestral music filled me with the kind of excitement that pulled me out of bed early in the morning and kept me up late at night. I began to devour scores and discovered that this excitement allowed me to remember huge swathes of information at a rate which I had not experienced before. I had discovered my passion, opening a door to a career which now, 8 years later, leads me to some of the finest orchestras in the world. But I was lucky. I found myself at various points surrounded by people who allowed me the time to refine the search for my passion. Not just to find music, but to find classical music, then the piano, then the cello, then orchestral music, and then conducting. A step-by-step distillation down to the essence. Many thousands of hours of work were involved at every stage, but in retrospect, fortune was smiling on me. And so I began to ask myself how the great good fortune that I had enjoyed could be made available to other people. And soon I was to meet some colleagues that were taking concrete steps to make that happen. But I'll tell you more about them and our story in Bremen in a moment. First, I'd like to take the opportunity to talk about a tragedy, and it's the tragedy of the divergence of the arts and science in education, and specifically the striking misconception among those individuals that determine our syllabuses that the arts are some sort of optional extra rather than an essential part of modern schooling. Last year, I took my orchestra, the Nuremberg Symphony, on a tour of China. We performed in 6 huge cities: Shanghai, Nanjing, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Wuhan, and finally at the National Center for the Performing Arts in Beijing. And look at that. We have a picture of it in that moment. I'm sure some of you will have seen this building live. It's an astonishing edifice containing several halls, all covered by what looks like half of an enormous egg, bathing in the glassy waters of the lake which surrounds it. It's only when you walk 100 or so meters back from the complex that it becomes clear what the hall is intended to represent. The half egg reflected in the lake creates one of the most iconic and meaningful symbols in Chinese culture, yin and yang. This astonished and delighted me, as it makes what I believe to be a profoundly important statement about art, that only when both the heart and the mind are functioning in symbiosis can art come to life. Because for me, understanding art and experiencing art are indivisible. Structure and freedom are not mutually exclusive, they augment one another. Just as you must first master the rules and structures of a language in order to be able to express yourself with true freedom, so must the intellectual and intuitive chime as one when engaging fully with the arts. This notion is key to understanding why the arts are an essential and non-negotiable part of a rounded education. One of my closest friends studied maths at Oxford and used to explain to me, and I don't know if this is the same for you, that he found a great equation truly beautiful, that reason could evoke in him emotion, that logic was aesthetic. I enjoy on a daily basis the same concept in retrograde, moving from the instinctive reaction to a beautiful sound to wonderment at the precision with which it has been crafted. This, in turn, augments and enhances the pleasure I have while listening to music. Imagine we're standing in an art gallery, looking at a painting by Leonardo. Unless you happen to have studied history of art here, your parameters for judging the work will probably be the same as mine. I like it or I don't like it. Then imagine that a friend joins us who knows the work intimately. He points out the use of perspective, Leonardo's understanding of anatomy, his use of color to make the skin glow, the thickness of the paint, the choice of motifs, the juxtaposition of unusual objects, the thematic roots in literature, scripture, or mythology. He talks to you about the context in which the work was painted, how it broke from the norm, and how it in turn created new barriers to be broken. Through this experience, a series of worlds are revealed, a number of doors are opened, to anatomy, to physics, to philosophy, to theology, to history, to symbology, to geometry, to ethics, aesthetics, and creativity. The beauty of the painting is augmented by your understanding of it, and your understanding is enhanced by the beauty of the image. To take another simple example of the symbiosis between creativity and intellectual rigor in the arts, and it's coincidentally an example that serves as an effective parallel to music, we can look at Shakespeare. His most frequent meter, iambic pentameter, consists of a simple scheme of 10 stressed and unstressed syllables. If music be the food of love, play on. Vast swathes of his writing adhere to this system. And it is precisely because he works within a formal system and structure that he can manipulate it. Now is the winter of our discontent, breaking with the expected rhythm by placing the emphasis on the first syllable, adding vehemence and nuance to the meaning. Composers regularly use precisely the same principle, setting up an expectation only to break with it. Sometimes they leave only very subtle clues, and the eye and the mind must therefore be trained to find them. Similar structures, codes, and systems pervade all of art and offer layers of beauty and meaning that are lost without awareness of them, like enjoying the shimmering surfaces of the oceans while remaining unaware of the currents and the canyons that lie below. And I am, of course, not advocating a purely intellectual approach to any of the arts. Quite the opposite. My whole point is that the visceral and the cognitive belong together, that our separation of the arts from other intellectual pursuits belies our own ignorance of those very arts. Just as the beauty of a leaf is not diminished by an understanding of photosynthesis, the value of a Mozart opera is only enhanced by appreciation of the codes and messages in its subtext. This kind of training also advances the interaction between the two systems of the brain responsible for the instinctive reaction to a word, image, or sound, and the understanding of the reaction, the relationship between the intuitive feeling and the deliberate understanding mind. There are very few disciplines which can boast of this versatility. And yet, judging by the almost total disappearance of the arts, and particularly music, from our schools, we have lost all understanding of the ways in which culture engages both the heart and the mind at once. How education in the arts allows people access to eternal truths and to the great treasures of our shared inheritance. The apparently prevailing belief among many politicians that the sciences train the brain and that the arts train the heart, and that the arts are therefore of less direct importance in basic education, is both ignorant and counterproductive. As Plato wrote, music is a moral law. It gives soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, and charm and gaiety of life to everything. It's of course no coincidence that I chose Leonardo da Vinci as our hypothetical artist. He was, after all, a man who embodied the synergy between the sciences and the arts, a living, breathing yin and yang, if you will. He surely would be horrified by the neglect and misunderstanding of the arts in our education system if he were here today. And why else is this of importance? Because it helps us to understand that our great forefathers, being it Shakespeare or Goethe, Mozart, Beethoven, Leonardo, Raffaello, Aristotle, Locke, Newton, or Galileo, were all searching for unifying truths in life, not diverging paths. The arts and the sciences belong together. And if you don't believe me, then may I give the last word on this subject back to Leonardo, who proclaimed the following principles for the development of a complete mind. Study the science of art. Study the art of science. Develop your senses, especially learn how to see. Realize that everything connects to everything else. Anyway, suffice it to say that I was impressed by the architecture of that hall in Beijing, so impressed that it now serves as my cover photo on Facebook, surely one of the highest expressions of admiration that we have in our time. And so I come back to that group of colleagues that I mentioned earlier, the ones who are intent on enabling good fortune for others. Here in Bremen, I have for several years enjoyed the immense privilege of working with the Deutsche Kammerphilharmonie. For those of you who don't know it, it's one of the leading orchestras of the world, consisting of a body of self-governing musicians who've been playing together since their late teens. They embody the aforementioned spirit of passion. In 2007, they decided to move their rehearsal halls from Bremen's city center out to the Gesamtschule Ost, a public school in the socially and economically disadvantaged suburb of Osterholz-Teneva. They did this in order to engage directly with a community in desperate need of support and investment. They wanted to use their knowledge, their expertise, their passion for music as a vehicle for promoting social cohesion and for broadening horizons. And so they founded the Zukunftslabor, or Future Laboratory, which doesn't sound so good in English, unfortunately, a multifaceted project which brings children into contact with music and improvisation, dance and theater, costume design, media studies, and many other disciplines. And alongside the various continuing elements of the program, such as musicians in the classrooms or the regular rehearsal visits, concerts, and dance projects, these school children from a community with tragically high unemployment figures and an incredibly diverse, complex, and challenging demographic also take part in an annual Stadtteil-Oper, or borough opera. Focusing on a different nationality each year, the opera serves as a vehicle for exploration of language, culture, history, and politics. And having begun with Germany, represented through Goethe's second book of Faust, we have since journeyed through the music, literature, and art of Africa, Poland, and Russia. This approach offers the students an unrivaled opportunity to engage in depth with different cultures and a real chance to develop understanding, appreciation, and tolerance of others. These operas involve hundreds of members of the school who prepare the work over the duration of a semester and subsequently perform the piece in their community for their community, shoulder to shoulder with the Deutsche Kammerphilharmonie and invited soloists under my musical direction and the guidance of a professional theater director. During these highly demanding productions, for which we often commission completely new music, the students are encouraged to take leaps of faith, to workshop ideas, to delve into the subject matter of the opera, to learn complex choreographies and music, to memorize and discuss texts by great writers, to sing, to dance, to play instruments, to paint, to design. And most importantly, they are expected to be committed to and invested in the project. I have, over the course of the last 5 years, witnessed how school children exhibiting major behavioral problems or hamstrung by shyness and low self-esteem have blossomed into mature young men and women. Through these projects, I've also learned that lowering our expectations of what children can achieve does them a great injustice, that we must instead raise the bar, challenge them, show belief in their abilities, show trust in them, and let them know that they can never fail if they are truly giving their all, to show them how everything is connected. I've also seen firsthand that the most brilliant and inspiring teachers are those that are truly in love with their subject. They are those that have pursued their passion. And so I would like to leave you with 2 requests. Firstly, keep searching for your true passions. Keep refining what it is that drives you. If you navigate by this guiding light, you will without doubt lead lives of enormous productivity and fulfillment. And so secondly, remember how privileged you are to have been given the opportunity to search for those passions and do everything in your power to pass that gift on to the next generation. I have seen firsthand how lives can be changed and improved through the serious engagement of passionate individuals. It is not an optional extra, it's a necessity. We are what we allow each other to be. So congratulations on your really extraordinary achievements. And now take the path not that lies nearest, but the path that will light a fire in you of such strength that it will burn for a lifetime, and such brightness that it will illuminate all of those around you. Good luck.